You are 24 the night you see her, crouched in front of a damaged canvas, a pen light between her teeth, measuring a crack in the varnish with a small brass ruler. Everyone else at the opening is drinking warm wine and talking about nothing. She is working. You find that more interesting than anything hanging on the walls. You ask her what she is looking for. She doesn't glance up right away. She tells you the painting was restored badly 40 years ago and somebody needs to undo it properly this time. You don't understand half of what she says next. Something about ground layers and retouching varnish, but you like the sound of her voice doing the explaining. You are an architect 2 years out of school, drafting parking structures for a firm that promised you cathedrals. You make $41,000 a year. You split a walk-up in a neighborhood you can't quite call safe. Your bike has a chain that skips on heels. She drives nothing that night. She takes a cab, and you don't think anything of it. You ask if she wants coffee sometime. Actual coffee, not gallery wine. She says yes so quickly it startles you both. You pick a diner because it's honest and it's cheap, and you don't yet know that honesty and cheapness will become complicated words in your life. She orders toast and eggs. You order the same because you're too nervous to choose anything else. You start seeing her twice a week, then most nights. She teaches you how to look at old buildings, the way she looks at old paintings, for the damage underneath the surface. You walk her home one night, and the doorman calls her by her first name, like he's known her for years. You think it's just a nice building? You don't ask questions you're not ready to hear answered. Then you search her last name on your phone, half out of curiosity, half out of habit. The first result is a magazine profile with her grandmother's face on the cover. The headline calls the family the last shipping dynasty on the eastern seaboard. You read 3 paragraphs and set the phone face down on your chest. You lie there a long time, staring at a water stain on your ceiling, feeling something tilt underneath you that you can't name yet. You almost don't call her back for 2 days. You tell yourself you're busy. You are not busy. You are afraid, and you know it, and you hate knowing it. You think about every story you've ever heard about people like you falling for people like her, and none of those stories end well for the poor one. She calls first. She doesn't mention the article. She tells you about a stupid thing her assistant did at work and makes you laugh so hard you forget, for a while, what you read. You decide not to bring it up. Neither does she. It sits in the room with you both anyway. Quiet and enormous, like a piece of furniture nobody agreed to buy. You meet her friends at a rooftop thing in the spring. They are pleasant in the practiced way of people raised to be pleasant to strangers. One of them asks what you do, and when you tell her, she says how creative in a tone that isn't quite a compliment. You let it go. You are learning to let a lot of things go. For a long stretch, none of it matters. You take the subway together because she likes the subway, likes disappearing into a crowd for 20 minutes where nobody knows her name. You wonder, sometimes, how long she can keep choosing the smaller version of her life before the bigger one pulls her back. You push the thought down every time it surfaces. You are happy. And happiness has a way of making you stop asking questions. You are 26 when you propose, on the pier where you had your first real fight and your first real apology. You'd saved 4 months, cutting out things you didn't think you'd miss until you missed them. The ring is modest. She doesn't care. She says yes, before the box is even fully open, and for one clean, uncomplicated minute, you feel like the luckiest man alive. The invitation to the family house comes 2 weeks later. Delivered instead of mailed by a driver who calls you sir in a way that makes your neck hot. The estate sits on a bluff over the water, white and enormous and older than your entire family tree. A woman built it, you'll learn later. A woman has run it ever since. Eleanor Calloway meets you in a study lined with ships, models under glass. She is 81 and sharper than anyone you have ever spoken to. She doesn't ask what you do. She asks what you've built that's still standing. You tell her the truth, that mostly you've built parking structures, and that none of it will outlive you. Something crosses her face you can't quite read. You decide not to guess at it twice. Her grandson finds you afterward, out on the terrace, a drink in each hand, though he only offers you the empty one. Desmond runs the family's legal and trust affairs, and has since he was younger than you are now. He's polite, in the specific way of a man who has decided you are temporary. He asks how you plan to support his cousin on an architect's salary. You tell him you plan to keep working. He smiles like you've confirmed something he already believed. The prenuptial agreement arrives by courier a week later, thick as a phone book. You read every page at your kitchen table with a highlighter. Alone. Because you need to know exactly what you're agreeing to before anyone can say you didn't. It is airtight. You walk away with nothing but what you brought in. You sign it without a flicker of hesitation, because you didn't come for the money. And you need them, eventually, to believe that. The wedding happens on the bluff in September, 400 guests deep, and you recognize maybe 30 of them. A shipping minister from another country toasts you in an accent you can't place. Someone's aunt turns out to have been a senator. Your mother wears the good dress she bought for your cousin's wedding 11 years ago and holds her head so high in that crowd that you have to look away before you cry. You say your vows and mean every syllable of them. She says hers back and means them too. That part, at least, is uncomplicated. And you hold on to that the way a man holds a rope. The honeymoon lasts 9 days. Real life starts on the 10th, when you move into the guest cottage on the estate. Because it's easier for now, and for now. Quietly stops having an end date. The cottage has 4 bedrooms and a housekeeper who refuses to let you carry your own bags. You try to make your own coffee the first morning and she gently takes the kettle out of your hands. You don't know how to be served. You are going to have to learn. Dinners with the family become a kind of exam you never studied for. Eleanor asks your opinion on a zoning dispute over one of their coastal properties, and you learn to say, "I'd want to see the survey first," instead of guessing badly. You learn that admitting you don't know something buys you more respect than pretending you do. Desmond watches you learn this in real time, and it seems to annoy him more than any mistake could have. You start spending mornings in the estate's archive room, where they keep the blueprints of every building the family has ever owned. Eleanor finds you there one afternoon, buried in drawings of a hotel they built in 1911. She doesn't say much. She just says. A week later, she asks you a real question about the old hotel's original foundation, and when you answer it correctly, she talks to you for an hour straight. It's the longest conversation you've had with her. You listen like it's a job interview, because in every way that matters, it is. Your daughter is born the following spring, and something in Eleanor's voice changes after that, softens at the edges in a way you hadn't thought possible. You quit the architecture firm not long after. Drawing parking structures felt small before. Now it feels absurd, next to a wife who sits on the board of a foundation that funds hospital wings. You have no title, no role, and no idea what you're supposed to do with your days. A man needs a place to put his hands to work. You don't have one yet, so you start showing up. You go to the ribbon cuttings and the trustee dinners, and you learn every name in the room. Who's rising, who's being quietly pushed toward the door. You notice Eleanor trusts almost no one completely, and that everyone around her wants something. You decide, deliberately, to want nothing out loud, and to make yourself useful in the meantime. The old Belhaven Hotel, the family's first great building, has been losing money for 6 years. Nobody wants it. It's a headache with a leaking roof and a union dispute and a preservation board breathing down its neck. Eleanor hands it to you in the archive room one evening, almost as an afterthought, though you both know it isn't one. You are 29 years old and you've never managed anything bigger than a 2-person drafting team. You are terrified. You take it anyway. You spend 18 months living inside that building's problems. You find the contractor who's been padding invoices for years and you let him go yourself, hands shaking the whole time. You fight the preservation board and win, then fight them again and lose, then find a version of the renovation that satisfies everyone enough to move forward. The hotel reopens on a cold morning in November, and for the first time since you married into this family, you walk into a room and people already know your name before you say it. Desmond stops smiling at you that year. He starts working the way the family works when it's unhappy. Nothing direct, nothing you could point to, just a permit that stalls for no reason. A rumor that reaches Eleanor's ear before you can explain it. You learn to fight the same way, quietly, with paperwork instead of arguments. Your wife tells you one night that Desmond did this to someone else once, years before you, and that the man never recovered his footing in the family again. You understand, finally, that the prenup was never the real test. By your late 30s, you sit on the family's preservation trust, the body that decides what gets saved and what gets sold. The men at that table have known the Calloways for decades, and most of them still see you as the husband who got lucky. You let them believe it as long as it's useful. Your son is born around this time, and between the two children you finally have something to build, toward larger than any single building could hold. You start doing something almost nobody else at that table bothers with anymore. You read the actual survey documents before every vote, not just the summaries. You start being the person who catches the detail nobody else caught. Eleanor begins calling you before board meetings now, not after. And there's a difference between those two things that took you years to learn to hear. You give her honest answers even when they cost you something in the room. You learn flattery is cheap around a woman who has been flattered her whole life, and that plain honesty, delivered carefully, is worth more than anything else you could offer her. Desmond overreaches at a trust meeting, pushing a sale that would quietly benefit a company his wife's family owns. You catch it in the paperwork 2 days before the vote and lay it out calmly. Numbers on the table, no accusation in your voice. He never forgives you for that room. Eleanor says nothing in the moment. That night she calls your private line and tells you that you see what the others miss. She asks you to dinner, just the two of you, and you understand a line has quietly been crossed for good. The years afterward blur into work. You sleep less than you should. You miss a school play and a soccer game you promised you wouldn't miss, and you carry both for longer than you probably need to. Your wife tells you to slow down and you promise her you will, and you both know, without saying it, that the promise has an expiration date neither of you controls. Certain problems in this family never make it to the trust table at all, and somewhere in your 40s, you become the person who handles those instead. A nephew's arrest overseas needs to disappear before it reaches a newspaper. A former business partner threatens a lawsuit that would drag old, ugly history into daylight. You fly out and meet him yourself, not with threats, but by finding out what he actually wants underneath the anger, which is almost never the thing he's asking for out loud. He walks away. Quiet. You fly home and tell no one the details, not even your wife, because some weights aren't meant to be shared. Desmond makes one last attempt to have you pushed out of the family's affairs entirely, standing in front of Eleanor and calling you an outsider who married his way into a fortune he never earned. She listens to the whole speech without interrupting. Then she asks him, gently, to leave the room. Nothing about the moment is announced anywhere. Nobody has to announce it. Everyone at that table already understands what just happened. Eleanor's health starts to fail the winter you turn 50. You spend more evenings at her bedside than at your own table, reading her old maritime histories the way she once made you study blueprints. Some nights she knows exactly who you are. Some nights she calls you by a name that isn't yours, and you answer to it anyway, because correcting her feels crueler than letting it go. She tells you the truth one night the machines are quiet enough to hear her clearly. She says she has known for 20 years that Desmond was never built to hold this family together, and that it has broken something in her she never let show. She tells you the name over the gate matters less than the people underneath it. She asks you to protect all of them when she's gone, including him. You spend her final months quietly rebuilding the trusts with her lawyers so that no single person can ever burn the whole structure down out of spite. You build protections around your own children and around Desmond's that will outlast every argument any of you ever had. Desmond finds out and comes at you furious, certain you're stealing what should have been his. You sit him down and tell him plainly that you're not taking anything from him, only making sure there's still something left for his children to inherit. For the first time in over a decade, he has nothing left to say back to you. Eleanor dies on a quiet morning in early spring, in the house she built her whole life around. The service fills a cathedral that seats more people than your hometown had residents. You give the eulogy the way you gave your own father's years before, and you find yourself speaking about a woman who built something enormous and was terrified, underneath all of it, of dying without anyone left who truly knew her. She didn't die that way. You made sure of it. You are 58 now, and somehow you are the one the family looks to when a decision needs making. It is the strangest feeling you have ever carried. You think, standing in that archive room again, about parking structures and a diner breakfast you couldn't quite afford, and a woman kneeling in front of a damaged painting with a penlight in her teeth. None of this was ever about the money. It never once was. That was the part they were always quietly testing you for. Your daughter runs the preservation trust now, careful and exacting the way you taught her to be. Your son restores old buildings for a living, the job you always wanted and never got to keep. Desmond, older and quieter, still sits at the table, and these days he mostly just listens. The family held together because somebody held it together, and it turned out to be you. Somewhere out there tonight, some other young man is sitting across a table from a woman he's only just met, watching her explain something he doesn't fully understand yet. Already falling for her before he knows her last name. He has no idea what he's about to marry into. He'll find out. They always do.